Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for our webinar on the Bonds Project 2025. I'm Dr. Mary O'Mara, Superintendent in Schools, and I'm joined by a few panelists, Dr. Dillon, our business official and oversees facilities, along with Andy Ward, our Director of Facilities. We have Mr. Bill Jackson, who is a member of our bond council from Hawkins and Delafield. And we also have our financial advisors from Capital Market, Alex Kerr, with us, and Joe Mile, our architect from H2M Architects. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. We'll move quickly into the presentation. Just to let you know a little bit, if you did not come through the pandemic with us, how we work our town halls, we go through the presentation. We have online a link to submit questions. So as you submit questions, we will start answering them as we go through a couple of slides. Our goal is to go through the slides first in order to get through the entirety of the presentation and then leave plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. If we run out of time and are not able to answer all of the questions, the Q&A will be published to the Bonds website on Wednesday afternoon. Thank you. And Joe Mile, thank you. I have your message about our other architect that won't be joining us tonight. A little bit about the Bonds Project. 2 years ago, when we saw an increase in enrollment, we waited to see if this was just a blip or this was going to be an ongoing trend. We know during the pandemic, a lot of people moved to Plainview Old Bethpage. We opened our schools quickly, but we also opened a remote school for about 22% of the population. What also began to happen was with the lower interest rates on mortgages going as low as 2.8%, many families who didn't have children in the district any longer opted to move out, many of them staying in Plainview and moving to Country Point. However, they sold their homes to families with children. Since 2018-19, the district has accepted over 450 new students, and that is no longer a blip from the pandemic. We have seen the continued growth, with Nassau County overall only seeing a 2% drop in enrollment as compared with New York State, where some of them are in the double digits of drops of enrollment. But we have had at least an 8.7% increase in student enrollment, and that continues to grow. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and we'll go into the presentation. I'd like to thank, while I move to the screen, our Bonds Committee, who is comprised of teachers in the district, administrators in the district, PTA parents, members of the community, and some of our students as ex officio members. We met with them privately and did tours of the building and of other districts to see or to get some ideas from them. I just need a thumbs up from somebody if we are seeing the presentation. Let's see. All I see are the devices. I see it now. Good. Thank you. Okay. So we'll get started on the presentation. So right now, we have a student enrollment at the high school that is 1,731 students. This data before you is critically important to understand why we think this is not just a blip, but we know it is a trend that is continuing. This chart shows us that the current class at the high school that's about to graduate has about 458 seniors. But that class, when it started as kindergartners in 2018, only opened that kindergarten group at 363 students. Similarly, the first grade class that started in 2018-19, they graduated a class of 400, they're 441 right now. So as you can see, our cohorts of students grow throughout the years as they traverse through the various grades. And this lets us know that adding to our buildings is a sound decision, because we're not building onto buildings and eventually have no students to fill those buildings or fewer students. We expect this problem to continue for at least the next 12 years, and it will become a larger problem with the classes that are currently sitting in our middle schools. As you can see from this chart from October 7th, Beds Day, how large the classes are in each of the grade levels. 1,734 in total will come to the high school over the next 4 years, where currently we only opened at 1,731. But what's interesting is the bottom. Our incoming first grade class this year started at 354. In the past 2 months, they've grown. They're already at 359. The kindergarten class has 358 students, and you can see that there will be at least 1,584 students through the class of 2037 at the high school. A little bit of history for some of you that don't know. There used to be two high schools in Plainview or Bethpage. There was a decision made in 1991 when both enrollments at what is currently POBMS and JFK High School dipped quite low. So they combined the high schools, and that is when there was a combined high school enrollment of 1337. That number started to creep up, and in 2000, it got as high as 1382, and a decision was made to add 10 more classrooms to the high school, which was completed and opened up for the 2002 school year. And at that point, the high school's enrollment was 1425. When they added those 10 additional classrooms, they did not add any additional bathrooms. They did not increase the size of the cafeteria. They didn't increase the size of the gymnasium, although they moved and created two spaces down in the basement of the high school where our yoga classes, dance classes, and weight room exist right now. So that high school is meant at the current number of classrooms and bathrooms to have about 1,500 students. Like I said, this year we opened with 1,731 students. Dr. Dillon, will you take the next slide?
Absolutely. So with a large scale project like this, many people ask why go for a bond? And just like any type of investment that you would make in your home or purchasing a home, you go for a mortgage or a home equity loan. A little bit different with school districts is, our bond rating is a AAA bond rating, equivalent to your credit score being an 800. It's the best credit rating you can get. It's based on the district maintaining healthy reserves. We have a stable tax base. We've had very strong financial audits, and that's due to the Board of Education investing not only in financial management of the reserves, but just the strong financial health of the district over the last many years. So the timing is perfect for us in terms of our rating to look at a large project like this with the growing enrollment and pursue a bond where you'd have a structured payment that that you would be paying every year over the duration of 15, 18 years, depending upon how long the borrowing cycle is. And you can incorporate that into your long-range financial plan.
Dr. Dillon, we just talk a little bit about the return we receive as far as building aid when projects are completed and how that helps our revenue stream year after year?
Absolutely. So one of the things that SED does is they award districts building aid based upon ratios in a complex formula, but POB is eligible to receive anywhere from like 48 to 51% building aid. And what that means is for every dollar we spend, we get about 50 cents back on the dollar. We're estimating 51% back. So in terms of the building aid that would be paid back to the district over the course of the borrowing cycle helps offset that debt service payment.
Thank you, Dr. Dillon. Our next slide points to another reason why it is more fiscally responsible to go out for a bond when we have this level of expense related to capital improvements and to address space needs, looking at the last bond we did. So Dr. Dillon, would you just explain a little bit of if we had to get all of these projects into our general operating budget, what might happen?
So basically, this slide just shows, 2014 bond covered some basic infrastructure, critical repairs that were needed for the district. So instead of going out for bond in 2014, if you were to divvy that up and project it out up until 2022, and basically add that to your allowable tax levy, the district would have had to pierce the cap each additional year to accomplish that. In addition, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish the work that we did in such a short amount of time because we were able to get an approved bond and fund those large capital projects in a faster manner, as opposed to if you had to go out every year and pierce the cap. This just shows like a structured payment in terms of the course of the life of the bond, and we were able to structure that in an overall debt service payment schedule.
Thank you. So moving into what this bond encompasses, there are two propositions coming to the voters on January 14th. This was done deliberately as a result of the recommendations from the bond committee. Proposition 1 touches every single instructional building in the district, and Proposition 2 is just about Jamaica Avenue. The bond committee felt strongly that Jamaica should be treated differently, to understand the community's value of Jamaica Avenue, and to inform subsequent decisions about what to do with Jamaica Avenue. But Proposition 1 is $99.5 million. About 40% of that is what is not so visible to the eye, and that is what has come up in our building condition survey. Every 5 years, the State Education Department requires all of public schools to have a building condition survey done. We bring in our architects and they go through everything related to safety of the building, the air quality, the infrastructure of electrical work, plumbing work, site-based work, ADA compliance, and recent codes that we must be in alignment with. And we submit that report to the state. And that is a commitment that we will make sure those things get done to keep our buildings in good standing for our students, staff, and faculty. So in 2020, we did a building condition survey that showed about $32 million worth of work. Here, like I said, it's not so visible to the eye, but this is the scope of the projects that would be occurring in every single building. Going back to Dr. Dillon's discussion on why a bond is better than going out through the general budget, we could not put $32 million into our general operating budget without piercing the cap and having that multiply year after year over in perpetuity, actually. A bond, at least when you structure the debt over time, there's an end date on that. So these infrastructure projects must get done regardless of the bonds passing or not. In 2025, we will be required to do another building condition survey. So what is on this list right now that does not get done will be added to the existing 2025 building condition survey, in addition to other areas that are uncovered. It is also important to note that what doesn't get done also becomes a liability or a vulnerability for the district. For instance, some of the roofing work in our buildings like POBMS, our roofing will be out of warranty. So if anything were to happen to that roof, we would have to find $5.2 million to make those repairs if there was a catastrophic storm, for instance. Dr. Dillon, next slide. Yep.
Okay, this slide basically touches on the rest of the common areas that would get air conditioning. You know, one of the important things that we're hearing at the state level is if the governor mandates an 88-degree, controlled climate law. And right now we'd be in the position where a majority of our cafeterias would exceed that during the hotter months, and our students then would have to eat in the cafeteria if that law were ever to come true.
Yeah. Some of the space needs. So this proposition includes additions to buildings, one of them being POB JFK High School. The propositions asks for the community to support the building of another gymnasium and also an auditorium performing arts center. By doing those type of extensions that match the ratio of students we have in the buildings and that participate, phys ed is a required course for all students for all 4 years in high school. And the performing arts, especially our music department, has seen an increased enrollment, and that trend has continued. This allows for us to recapture space in the current high school and more students that we can move into physical education classes, larger groups in band and orchestra will open up classroom spaces in the high school. But the additions will add 4 new classrooms and then within the existing guidance counseling suite, 6 new classroom spaces within the current building, and then renovations to our band and chorus rooms, our existing ones, to house the life skills and family and consumer science programs. It allows for a reconfiguration of the current auditorium or a large group instructional area where we would be able to create a career counseling and college center for our students, where all of our guidance counselors, all of our social workers and psychologists would be seated, and then an overflow space for our students. These are renderings of what it would look like. We are not in the design phase yet, but this is what our architects provide to us so we can paint a vision of what it may look like. Some people have looked at this and said, wow, that's pretty audacious. Do we need something as grand? I have to tell you, the size of our high school population demands an auditorium that fits more than 500 people in it. We have all of our classes are over 400, and many of the programs that are housed in our music department are exceeding the size of our stage. I want to show you the floor plan for it. So the plan for the auditorium would have seating for 800 people. That's critically important because it would be climate controlled. And also, most of the testing is moving to computer-based testing. Right now, when we do a PSAT, we have to have asynchronous instruction because we can't test 300 students in the building when they have to be in separate locations. All of the advanced placement exams that happen for 2.5 weeks in May are all computer-based testing. And we have to capture spaces inside the building, relocate classes, and that is quite disruptive. Also, the SAT is all computer-based right now. So with an auditorium of that size that we could do testing in, we would be able to spread out large groups of students, reducing the cost of proctors, but more importantly, having a space for large group computer-based testing events. As you can see, the plan calls for a band room that's 3 times the size. Right now, our band is over 130 students with all of their large instruments. They are on top of each other as they do their daily practice. Our orchestra right now for grades 9 to 12 is 121 students. Not only do they not all fit in the orchestra room for practice, they don't fit comfortably on the stage. If you go to our Facebook page, you will see we posted a video of Sleigh Ride, the last piece. Our bassists were about to fall off the stage. If they took one more step back, they would be on the steps. But that number of 121 is critically important because that is the size of our current orchestra for grades 9 through 12. Our 4th graders that are in orchestra right now are 121, just one grade level. So when we go back to the original slides of how large our groups coming into the high school are, please know that the retention as they move into middle school and then from middle school to high school in our music program is there. They all stay with these programs. Another thing we've used the high school auditorium for are for honor societies. Last year, because of the size of the classes, we had to split them into 2 sessions. We're not able to do one full grade level assembly comfortably. And then the last is we wanted to do moving up ceremonies here, but we didn't have enough room for certain elementary schools to move up in one climate controlled location. This is a rendering of the proposed cafeteria. Our current cafeteria only fits 238 students. The proposal adds enough seating for over 400 students. Some folks might not think that's that important, but right now our high school starts its lunch hour at 8:51 in the morning, and it goes almost through the end of the day, period 2 through period 8. That really is very problematic. If we could have lunch periods that have more students coming to lunch, very similar to phys ed, it would pull more students out of the classrooms and allow for more classrooms to be used for the mandatory courses all have to take. English 9, 10, 11, and 12, social studies 9, 10, 11, 12, and then we have math and science students, that go through at least to the highest levels of math and science. But there are required courses for graduation that all students have to take, and having more in the cafeteria with fewer periods opens up more classrooms. This is what it looks like. This would also include our school store being housed inside of the cafeteria along with POB Perk. That is our newly designed program for our special education students to run like a Starbucks inside the high school. Right now that's housed in one of the instructional wings, which really, doesn't make sense. Chris, you want to just talk about the gymnasium, the addition to that, and what other high schools have as far as our size and how many gymnasiums they have on their campuses?
Absolutely. So, there's actually high schools surrounding us, Syosset High School, Hicksville, MacArthur Division, that are either the same size or a little bit less, and they all have second gyms, which aids in scheduling and frees up additional classes. So not only can the master schedule be more efficient, it allows for more gym PE classes to go on at the same time.
Yeah. And then also there would be additional parking added to this plan. So this would allow for different events to happen in the gymnasiums and for community use after hours and parking there so they don't have to go through the entire building. So we use our gyms a lot for our community programs, and that would be a plus for the community with this additional gymnasium. This is the proposed floor plan where we would have a gymnasium, we would have a weight room, a fitness yoga class, more locker room space. Storage, this is important, although it doesn't seem like a big deal. But right now, all of our uniforms, because we don't have room at the high school, are housed at Stratford Road. So that's really inefficient. We have an athletic coordinator that has to go to Stratford Road at the change of seasons, collect all the uniforms, bring them to the high school for distribution. This would allow for that to happen, and people can just pull up and different coaches and get their uniforms and not travel to an elementary school to do that. These are some other renderings of the gym space. And then another building that is out of room for the students it houses and the program it houses is JJP. So Proposition 1 also includes a proposed addition onto JJP of 4 more classrooms and bathrooms for staff and students, along with an outdoor exit for the students and staff, but for a bathroom. So over the weekends and when school isn't in session, the community can use the bathrooms when the different groups like PAL and or POB soccer, flag football use the fields. They will have access to the bathroom that has a lock off, so they can't get into the school building. What you also see there in that rendering is an adaptive playground. JJP now has 2 grade levels of special class students, some of them with various mobility issues. So this would be a playground built for them as well. The school has grown over 100 students since 2018. We recently redistricted so that more students were fed to JJP because Stratford Road was approaching 700 students. But that only resulted in 20 extra students winding up at JJP. The 100 students plus is a result of new families moving in. Now that pales in comparison to 1976. Judy Jacobs Parkway, which was just Parkway Elementary School at the time, had 578 students in it. But that's when there was half-day kindergarten and class sizes were up to 30. So we have board guidelines now that don't permit class sizes to go above 24 for K-2, and then nothing more than 28. I'm sorry, 26, 28. Sorry, I should know that. Up to 4th grade. And we don't really go near those numbers, but that's a reality. Also, we have very different elementary programs that didn't run back in the day when Judy Jacobs had that kind of enrollment. Right now, Judy Jacobs teachers are doing their CSEs via Google Meets in very small spaces, little closets, little back offices behind the library. There's no community space for the teachers to meet and plan. And art and Chinese are sharing a classroom. So we have in our strategic plan a commitment that we would have equitable learning spaces. So right now that equity doesn't exist at JJP. And also that we would have spaces that host the programs we provide. And unlike, say, Old Bethpage that has an additional room for a play space and they have an additional room for teachers to meet and get professional development and do data analysis and things like that, JJP does not have that room. This is the proposed floor plan for that. And then Dr. Dillon, would you take the fields?
Absolutely. So as we continue to meet with different stakeholder groups, one of the things that's come up is that, there's a lot of fields in this. We know right off the bat that our high school turf field is coming to the end of its useful life, and we will have to budget for it. In addition to that, we're estimating that to be almost $1 million. Putting in additional fields will do a number of multiple things. It will help decrease our long-term maintenance costs in terms of when we have to get soccer, baseball, softball ready. It will also help with our Title IX and compliance issues. It'll be fair for both boys and girls teams to use all fields. In addition, what has come up is, people have asked, well, what about the other fields at the elementary schools? Having turf, you're allowed more teams to use it longer throughout the year. It can take more wear and tear than a normal field. So to give us the ability to put a schedule together to target certain fields, the only time that you can reseed certain fields is either in the spring or the fall, both heavy use times. We cannot reseed and replenish fields in the summer. So this would give us the ability to put a schedule together where we wouldn't impact, community use and our own team's use as well. And everybody would have access to all these different fields. One thing you don't see in the slides here is there's also a call for turf field over at POB Middle. So it'll be a balance at both sides of throughout all schools for everybody to use, not including just our teams.
Thank you, Dr. Zillan. And also what some of you who may not be aware or don't have students that are involved in the athletic program, we are shipping students all over to different buildings for the various sports. Our girls kick line and cheerleading practice over at Stratford Road. Our gymnastics team practices over at Jamaica Avenue. So by adding an additional gym and additional fields, we would be able to take the teams to their proper place, which is closer to the high school or at the high school, which would open up more spaces for our middle school teams to practice. And then, like Dr. Dillon said, our community use on the weekends as well and during times that school is not in session. This is an
Just
aerial. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry. Just one more thing to add about the fields. There's questions. Why would you bond? Turf fields. Which useful life ends before the borrowing cycle is paid off. And one of the most important and expensive aspects of turf fields is the actual first-time installation. So whether it be the drainage, the excavation, that's the heavy part of it. Then afterwards, we can actually have a long-range replacement schedule of the fields and incorporate that in our annual operating budget, as opposed to just installing a brand new field every certain number of years because the foundation is already there for you.
Thank you, Chris. So this is an aerial view of JFK High School's campus and the back of Matlin Middle School. It's important to point out this is where the new auditorium would be. This is where the gymnasium would be. The gymnasium would go over where our existing tennis courts are. We would be moving them over here closer to the Matlin tennis courts, and both sets of courts would be lined for tennis and pickleball, which is a plus for the community. Also, recently, our adult ed program that we run, there is a request to start an adult pickleball league. And if we had the facilities to do that, we could. There is also a need for additional parking. With the high school growing, we have had to add more staff there. So this would add additional parking to the back. Matlin Middle School also has a parking issue. So over here in the back of Matlin, there's a proposed 67 parking spot developed. There was a question, would we have from this parking lot to get to the high school main field here a walkway? The answer is yes, we can do that. This is just a rendering. And then important for parents that care about this, as I would, on the snow days, the sledding hill is not going to be disrupted, but our custodians would be very happy if you parked here then. So when they cleared the front lots to open schools, the back lots would, that back lot's not that important. Will be a multi-purpose field in between the tennis and pickleball courts that could be used by the soccer teams. And as you can see, there's a practice baseball, softball, diamond in there as well. And that is all that is in Proposition 1 for the $99.5 million. And when you think about 2014's $48 million bond that did much of the infrastructure work, we are getting infrastructure and exterior work done, additions to buildings, fields, enlarged cafeteria, auditorium, gymnasiums, and in addition to an elementary school for double that price, which we would receive approximately 50% back over time in state aid. Proposition 2 is all about Jamaica Avenue. Right now, we house 3 tenants there, 2 daycare providers and UPK providers, along with ACDS's offices. That building right now, just to keep the elements out, roof and windows, would be about $7 million worth of work. But without having students there, we would receive no building aid back on that. That would be a pure spending of the taxpayers' $7 million. And we absolutely would have to start planning for how those improvements would get done to make sure the building doesn't get destroyed by the elements. And because we have some of the youngest community members in those buildings are 0 to 4-year-olds. The second part is to bring it up to SED's standard to have students in it would be $14 million. With a 50% rate back, we're expecting to spend $7 million over time, 14, and then get about $7 million back in building aid to allow for us to bring students there. We've been asked, what would you bring students there for? We have an alternative high school that runs at JFK High School. And right now, we don't take in out of district students, but when we think about opportunities to generate revenue, because we run our Twilight program or alternative high school through BOCES, we could take in tuition-based students, but we wouldn't do that at the current campus because there's just not enough room to begin with for our own students. We couldn't take in more. So one of the thoughts was to move our alternative high school over there. Also, we asked our architects to envision certain other things that we would be doing there. With the new graduation measures going to one diploma with various credentials that include work-based learning, career exploration, and also special education students needing more career preparation or work-based learning experiences, we just don't have the campus for that at JFK High School. So we would have a multi-purpose room, professional development, community use, large group gatherings. We could host a complete culinary and hospitality program there with our special education students and our DECA students, our business students. We would produce a makerspace / work-based learning area for some of the high school CTE pathways, but makerspace to provide an alternate location for the elementary students to learn and develop and build their innovation skills as it relates to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then also the robotics lab. We spoke to some robotics parents who were talking like, you can't move the robot, but one of the things coming out of POB Media is a drone program. So we just don't have any space for that. Also, the development of our architecture and engineering program. We really don't have spaces for them to build what they're designing in the classroom. So this would provide an outlet for those students to travel to the building and do more hands-on experiences. And now for the money part, I'll leave it to Dr. Dillon to talk about that and the tax impact.
Okay, so you see in this slide, it is broken down. Recommendation from the bond committee was 2 propositions. One including basic infrastructure. Our buildings are 60 to 70 years old. So about $40 million of this work is addressing those critical infrastructures that we saw in the beginning of the presentation that addresses plumbing, HVAC, locker room, ADA accessibility, ventilation, site work. So this is something that we have identified. They've identified in the building condition survey that we know that needs to be done. Also, one of the recommendations too from the committee was Jamaica Avenue and putting that as a separate proposition, letting the community decide. We know that the building is as aged. It has a lot of facilities needs. So the board is committed to investing not only in the building, but in terms of separating that out and showing that, there is an opportunity to bring instructional back in there. In addition, if we were just to renovate our space, that would be $7 million, the space that the district currently has. If we were to do the whole building, it would be $14 million. With the building aid ratio at 50% on the dollar, we would get that $7 million back, therefore only costing us $7 million to do that entire building.
Thanks, Chris. And then the next one, the impact on the taxpayer.
So if anybody wants to see the average impact, we do have a tax impact calculator on our website. So based upon the average assessed value home, we have a link to Nassau County's website where you can pull up your own individual tax bill, get your assessed value, and then plug it into the calculator to see the average impact that you would see to your own individual home. But based upon both props, you see a $500 to $550 yearly increase here.
Thank you, Dr. Dillon. So right now we've had several presentations. We've done Board of Education presentations. We've had our bonds committee recommendations presented to the board. And right now you're in the town hall December 9th. These are additional opportunities to learn more about the bond. We are going to be doing a guided bus tour on January 4th. Our PTA today asked, maybe that might not be the best day. It's a Saturday. If we could do another one during the work week, we're looking into doing that. But we really think it's very important for folks to understand the conditions of the buildings and also to look at the high school, the crowding at the high school, the cafeteria, the gymnasium. We would encourage people to come to some of the high school concerts to see how tightly packed the students on the stage are. And then also to visit Jamaica Avenue to see the state of that building. So we're going to turn it over to questions right now. If you would just give Dr. Dillon a second to get on the questions, on some of the questions that have come in. So I'll ask them, and anybody of our panelists who have the answer can answer them live. We had some questions come in much earlier. I'll publish those to the bond website. I don't think it's the people on this video right on this recording right now. I'm going to do the ones that came in once the reminder for the town hall came out, because I'm assuming, and then during the meeting that we've had during this presentation, we've gotten a good deal more. So one of the people have asked, there is a heavy focus of sports facilities and other things we're told being budgeted for. Whoop, I have to get to the rest of the question. I'm sorry about that, folks. I just have to, I'm out of room here. Format. I can't read it. Okay, here we go. There's a heavy focus of sports facilities and other things that residents were told were being budgeted previously over the last 8 years. The district is currently unable to provide mental health services daily within the schools proportionate to the needs of the students. And they mentioned South Oaks as a partnership. We do a partnership with Northwell Health. Why was the priority in sports, turf, and fields and not on student mental health or support needs? So I can answer that question. The mental health and support needs are being addressed in the reconfigured LGI with a mental health, a career and counseling center in there. Also, the partnership we have with Northwell Health does allow us to partner with satellite spaces. We just don't have any additional space. That could be an alternate use for some of the rooms in Jamaica Avenue should the bonds pass and Proposition 2 pass. Right now, though, we don't have any more room to house a mental health clinic or other things you might be seeing. I know Baldwin opened one, but they had a space for that. Why not just build a new building on the property to deal with overcrowding? It would be cheap and actually fix the issue. Maybe we'll go to our architect for that. So when you think of the addition to the high school, which is about 29,000 square feet with the new gymnasium and auditorium and the existing footprint, what would that maybe cost if you had to build from scratch, Joe?
I think the first issue to jump past is property size that we would need in order to do an addition of that size. Right now, where we're placing this addition on the high school, your building facilities as they're tied into your existing building helps work with the existing footprint, and the amount of students that currently attend your high school need that expansion of space. To build a new building from scratch, I think you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't think you're talking $40 million to build a brand new building.
And then the question would be, what do we do while that's being built? You still have to address. And how long would it take if you had a property just to build a brand new building to start with the planning, state ed approval, and then actual construction?
2 to 3 years.
Yeah, thank you. So here's another question. How many seats would be in the new Performing Arts Center? There would be 900. Will the community be able to use and rent it for local theater groups? We do have a very generous use of facilities policy, and we do currently allow different groups to use our gyms, our fields. We have people come in and do a performance at Stratford Road, our Lunar New Year performance. So yes, the answer is yes to that. I don't suspect the board will change their policy. Will the bond funds be pooled due to regionalization? Okay, so great question, really timely. The bond funds could never be used for anything but what is proposed here. This gets voted on and this gets state approved, and the state is very judicious at looking at our projects as they relate to what was publicized to the community, what the scope of the project was. We would not be able to pool them. And the second part of regionalization is what the Board of Regents did today. They made it very clear that it's voluntary, and we would not volunteer at this point to pool money resources outside of a bond, even our own budget, with another district at this point. That just doesn't make sense, nor is there a need. Our current budget supports our programs as is, and by the time any planning would be done for regionalization purposes would be beyond this. So no, don't conflate the two separate things. One is a state ed regulation, and a bond is completely local. Local taxpayers vote on it, and the plan is as we described it to you. Any other questions? Chris, I don't know if you see other questions that have come in.
Yeah, but we're putting them in the chat here. We have a question about UPK students at Jamaica. Don't they count as part of the POB community?
They do count as part of the POB community, and that's why we feel pretty strongly we must address the needs at Jamaica Avenue. They house our own students, and those UPK students come to the district. However, that's a lease issue. So those UPK daycare centers, they lease from us, and their rent covers the operating costs as far as the security guards, the custodian, the electric bills, the energy bills, but they do not cover the rental revenue we receive from them does not cover these type of construction projects like new roofs, new windows. That would be beyond what they're supposed to be doing right now. That's on the landlord. Another question?
When would the tax increases begin, and for how many years would it last?
Great question. So should the bond pass on January 14th, which we hope it does, our architects would begin working with the various buildings on the specific design plans, which we would hope to have up to the state by late spring. Joe Mile, I hope you're nodding at that timeline, but we pretty much think that can get done. It takes the state about 12 months to approve plans, go through them, and then we would have a construction schedule. We would never borrow the whole 99 million at one time. The priority would be to build the spaces immediately necessary, like the JJP extension, which can happen during a school year, the addition and the 2 additions to the high school and the field work. So we're suspecting that we would start our borrowing sometime in late 2027. So it would start, the taxpayer would start feeling that impact probably the second half of their 2027 tax bill, 2028 tax bill. It's about 3 years. Another question?
Question about the newsletter. The fall 2024 district newsletter said a special bond newsletter would be sent to all residents. Has this been sent out to all residents? If not, when? Why has it been sent out?
Great. We just did the final edits on that on Friday. So they just went to the printer, and we're expecting them on homes before the winter recess, which is somewhere around December 20th, December 18th and 20th, which is in time for people over that recess period and for our community members to read through it and then make a decision if they're going to attend any of the subsequent events on January 4th, the guided bus tour, coming January 6th, where this type of presentation would be in person. We have that scheduled at 6 o'clock so that folks can come to HB Matlin Middle School's library, and they can choose what table they want to sit at. So they can sit with our financial advisors, they can sit with our architects, they can sit with district administrators or members of the bonds committee to answer certain questions they may have related to those particular areas. Other questions?
There's a question about POB's roof, and it's almost out of warranty. And why wasn't there a contingency plan?
Well, there always is a contingency plan, and that's the purpose of a 5-year building condition survey. So we do have money in our capital reserves, but each year we make a decision of what projects we would do with those monies. We also have in our general operating budget a line for capital projects that we do, and this past year we put 1.5 million for that. But what's important to note is the board was very wise when we started investigating our enrollment issues and then some of our critical infrastructure facility issues. They asked us to be mindful of not doing something that eventually has to be undone. So until the bonds committee made the decision to add on to JFK High School or made the recommendation to which we supported, a lot of buildings were in flux. For instance, the high school gymnasium is not, the current one is not air conditioned. And in our budget, we had found capital money that, we closed out certain projects and had enough to air condition the high school gym. But until the bonds committee made its final recommendations, we didn't know if that roof was going to be disrupted, so we wouldn't have put a unit on it. Now that we know that the high school's additions don't impact our current gymnasium, we are moving forward with that project. So POBMS's roof would be one of the major priorities we would have going into next budget season should this bond not pass. Which is another question that came up. What if the bond doesn't pass? Well, the reality is we just don't have enough room in certain buildings. What this district has done many years ago is done redistricting. We would have to consider moving a grade out of the high school. Certain districts do that already. There was talk back when we did the middle school enrollment challenge of creating a 5, 6, and a 7, 8 building. That idea really was not widely accepted by the community through some of our surveys and thought exchanges. But I have to tell you, there would be a consideration to go back to POB middle school and maybe make it a 7, 8, 9 building. Because at one point, you're just not going to have enough classrooms to support the students that are at the high school. And we have to be able to say we can feed them throughout the day. And having to have 1,700 students starting last year, it started second period lunch. Now it's third period. But, you know, as students may not go out, the juniors and seniors, for lunch, we have to make sure there's a space for them. Right now, during those lunch periods, periods 3 through period 8, the cafeteria is fully packed. Then the overflow goes to the library, and then there's still an overflow, and they go into the auditorium and sit during that period when they don't have a class assigned to them or a lunch period assigned and they're done eating. And that's just not the way our students should be experiencing their lunch period. Any other questions? Let's see. Yeah. Here's a good question. Should the bond not pass, how much work still has to be done? We still have that 32 million that must get done. And that's only going to grow. And keep in mind that 32 million has seen inflation attached to it. So we're in 2024 right now, going into 2025. Those prices are from 2020. So that work has to get done, and we will just have to start putting it into the general budget, which would, you know, like I said from the beginning, increase the expenses, which increases the tax levy, and that stays forever, whereas a bond exhausts over time. Will the new weight room contain the same amount of barbell racks as the current one? If so, how many? I don't know if anyone here can answer that question. Andy, I don't know if you know the barbell count, but it is going to be larger than our existing weight room and have all the current equipment that's in our weight room moved to it. So I don't know if that will have room to add more, but that was the plan for the weight room. And that, anything else? There's something about Fern Place here. Hold on, we sold that building. Do you see that one, Chris, on line 34? Has redistricting and possible use of the Fern Avenue School been considered? We sold Fern Place in 2019-20 to ACDS, so we don't have access to that building any longer. That building was a discussion for quite some time with the Board of Education and the district, because that is very similar to Jamaica, had fallen into disrepair because there were no students in it, and any type of work done at Fern Place to keep the building and to keep the building safe and the elements out, we didn't get any return on that as far as building aid. So the decision was made to sell that. The district sold it and kept the covenant, had a covenant on that where we kept access and rights to the fields there. So we don't have access to that building any longer to solve an enrollment problem. And that's why there's a real reticence to consider selling Jamaica Avenue, because that would be the last building we don't use. And we don't know, we know through 2037, we'll have this large amount of groups, but it could get even larger. How are we getting information out to the community? Similar to the newsletter that most of you received at home, there will be a separate bond newsletter, and social media presence will increase. There will be 3 times a week a posting to social media. We have videos that will be posted as well, along with the various thing on the timeline I showed you earlier. Any other questions, Chris, that you see that we haven't answered?
Some will require some additional research, but we'll be able to get those out by Wednesday.
Great. And the last one is, how do we register for vote? If you go to the bond website right now on the district's website, you will see that the landing page has a link to see if you are already registered to vote and where. If not, we will have in-person registration on this. I'll have to look that up. I don't have that memorized yet. So if you just give me a minute, I will go to our website and get that right now. Bonds Project. So this is our bond website. So we will have on December 19th and January 7th from 3 to 7 in-person registration. Also, absentee ballots will be available on the website this Friday. The link is here to see if you're registered to vote. And then here on the bonds website, you see the bonds calculator that lets you know how you can estimate your taxes here. Right here is the link to Nassau County Assessment Office. It will give you, once you plug in your address, your assessed value. And then all you have to do is put that assessed value here, and it'll tell you how much your annual tax bill is expected to go up. And like I said earlier, you probably won't see the full increase until about 2028. And that's based on just Proposition 1. And then, you know, you can change it a little bit based on both propositions. Anything else? The anticipated completion date for all of this is probably 5 years from passing of the bond until the end. So probably 2030. Ooh, 2030. Anything else? Okay. So any questions we didn't get to? There are about 9 minutes. Did we not cover anything from our panelists that you want to point out, or financial analysts? You don't have to answer. Bonds counsel and or architects that you think is important in your experience with bonds in other districts? Okay. And thank you, participant number 30, who said, I love everything about these projects. It's well overdue and needed. Appreciate that. We've worked really hard. Our committee worked hard. And I have to tell you, the best part of this so far was the work we did with our student government officials, who we took to a neighboring district, showed them what their new facilities look like after their bonds had passed. And I have to tell you, they were really excited, and you'll hear from them on some of the videos we'll post over the next couple of weeks. So if there are no more questions, we'll end this webinar. Again, we will post this to the website, and the total frequently asked questions and your answers to these questions will be posted on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a great evening.